What are elegant Shorekeeper's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. One really exciting thing about Shorekeeper is that she's going to be one of the definitive new best units in Wuthering Waves. We'd all agree that Verina is one of the game's top meta units right now, yes? Well, Shorekeeper is essentially an extremely souped up Verina. Like, really souped up. Her team flexibility is absurd, and basically every 5-star main DPS in the game is going to ideally want Shorekeeper as their third slot, much like Verina. So regardless of who you main, this lovely butterfly lady is going to be an insanely valuable addition to your roster. That's not all, because you can also look at this from another angle. The endgame in WuWa asks that you have multiple solid teams, yeah? Much like how Link Shaw is an upgraded second Gallagher, Shorekeeper is an upgraded second Verina, meaning that you'll be able to spare the Grass Kid for another team, while allowing your best team to shine even brighter with the enhanced buffs that Shorekeeper provides. She is the first proper, fully dedicated 5-star support in Wuthering Waves. You could argue that Jaja technically was the first, but I prefer to view her as a sub-DPS with supportive qualities. So not only is Shorekeeper going to be an incredibly meta unit, but she's going to have a wildly long shelf life too. Her positive qualities are so darn universal. And before her, our only real definitive best insult support option was Verina. Expanding our cast of purely supportive characters is a great thing, because so far, it felt like we kept only getting releases that filled the first and second team slots. As for the quality of Shorekeeper's buffing, oh boy. First, to put into perspective how strong her buffing capabilities are, we should speak about what Verina, the current best third slot in the game, offers to a team when looking at her base kit only. In her regular S0R0 base kit, she provides a 15% damage amp with her outro skill, plus 20% attack from her first inherent skill. Yeah, the bar isn't exactly high, but the game's gonna only be 3 patches in, man. Then, if we look at the Chad-S Shorekeeper, she can provide a max of up to 12.5% crit rate, 25% crit damage, and up to 15% damage amp. That's extremely wild by the game's current support standards. Absolutely nothing comes close to this yet. And that's not all. If you take a look at Shorekeeper's main weapon option, that's 12% attack for you. This lady is the gift that keeps on giving. And considering that weapons in this game are always guaranteed, it's not too far-fetched to imagine somebody picking it up. With that being said, even if you only stick with her base S0R0 buffs, she will still provide an absolutely insane buff to your team. I'd also like to add that all DPSs in WuWa as of now have been crit DPSs, and I expect things to stay this way until they've exhausted all the main different ways that you can execute a crit DPS's kit. There's no Hyper Bloomers or Super Breakers in this game as of now, so these crit buffs are quite literally as universal as it gets. Same applies to your damage deepen, of course. Another really solid thing that Shorekeeper has going for her is her ability to group up foes. This isn't a major selling point, considering that grouping in this game isn't a massive deal, but it can be pretty useful in the lower TOA floors and in the overworld. Plus, it also expands the large package of what this character is providing you. She'd already be a top tier meta unit if we only got her insane quality buffs, but the fact that she groups adds another delicious cherry on top. I'd also like to mention that the overworld is actually rather relevant in WuWa because you can farm echo sets. Because of this, her grouping is actually really nice quality of life. It'll be quite nice when you're trying to farm tacit fields too. I can imagine pairing her with the handsome Gion would bode quite well against heavily AoE content. Also, any excuse to use Gion is a W. Look at him. Plus, Shorekeeper herself honestly has neat personal damage numbers. Now, don't get me wrong, don't expect anything absolutely crazy from her. She is a dedicated support after all. However, her damage numbers with her new signature Echo will be triple of Verina's, assuming that you've leveled up the character fully, and even without her main Echo set, you'll still get double of Verina's damage. The best way for me to put this into perspective is that it's nice in the way that Kazuha's Swirling Pyro is nice, or it's nice in the way that Gallagher's ult break in a Super Break team is nice. It's far from the main source of damage in your team, but it's still significant enough to affect your clears in a positive way. Every little helps. Thanks for shopping at Testkeeper. Something really neat about Shorekeeper is her ability to perform 3 perfect dodges. Alright, what am I yapping about? Well, if you get hit while her outro skill is active, you can quickly press dodge after getting hit and the game will still register it as a perfect dodge. This minimizes the stun you take from getting hit, and as we all know, perfect dodges build up concerto, which allows supports to trigger their outro skills faster. This may also cancel the damage that the enemy does, but take that with a grain of salt, as in-game testing is gonna need to be done on said theory. I would like to say that Shorekeeper is such a good character to the point where these cons are more or less nitpicks. These are still important to consider if you're on the fence in regards to pulling for this unit, but I don't believe any of these negatives should be major deal breakers. Regardless, I shall still mention them. Shorekeeper wants to build a stat in order to make the most of her buff. Whoa, no way! You have to actually build the character? Yes, I know that's such a nothing problem, but the main reason that I bring it up is because other buffing units in the game don't require any specific stats to make the most out of their buffs. Verina costs basically no resources. If you're not in need of her later inherent skill, then you level the plant kit up to 50 and that's all, because her outro skill and first inherent skill do all the talking buffs-wise, which doesn't require anything from Verina's echoes. Then we take a look at Baiji, who's in the same predicament. No particular stats needed, just use her outro and you're good to go. Obviously, you're gonna build these characters with supportive echo sets and weapons anyway for additional buffs, but you get the point. There's no break points for them to reach. Plus, Shorekeeper ain't asking for any chump amount of ER, 250 without the new echo and one of her passives, and 230% if we include both of those things as they provide her with 10% ER each. To say that this woman likes energy is an understatement. However, my opinion on this is that in turn, you get way higher quality buffs from Shorekeeper. It's worth the effort. Plus, come on dude, it's only one stat. Build up her ER, I believe in you. Another con is that Shorekeeper's grouping doesn't matter all that much in the grand scheme of things, which I alluded to earlier. Grouping in WuWa is rather situational, and while it definitely has its place in some scenarios, it's definitely no major selling point. So while it's a pro in the sense that you'd rather it be there than not be there, it's a con in the sense that it's not really going to be relevant to difficult endgame gameplay in the first place. This seriously is such a major nitpick because I'd rather it be there than not be there, but I suppose you can take this as me telling you not to over-hyper grouping too much. Another issue I take with Shorekeeper is that her buff is backloaded. This means that, unlike the game's other two key buffers, you don't get her buff up front immediately. You need to build it up over time with outro skills from the rest of your party. For instance, 0 outro skills, no cigar. This Keeper of Shores is going to give you none of those crazy buffs that I talked about. 1 outro skill? Alright, nice. Now you're going to trigger the crit rate buff. And then 2 outro skills, finally, you've hit the jackpot at last. You'll get both of the crit buffs at this stage. What's nice is that our damage amp triggers upon our outro, so you're not gonna have to worry about that aspect being backloaded. Nonetheless, backload is pretty annoying, especially for sub DPS characters who aren't gonna be getting the crit damage buff during their field time. Once again, not a total deal breaker. Even half of Shorekeeper's max buff is already freaking wild for all DPS characters, but of course it's still worth considering. Shorekeeper is a wonderful character. Whether you're somebody coming back to WuWa after putting the game down for a while, or if you're somebody who's been playing the game every day ever since it came out, you should absolutely consider pulling for Shorekeeper. This lady is genuinely going to make your time playing this game absurdly fun because the nuclear amounts of damage that you'll be able to do with her is gonna be crazy. Her addition into the game has quite literally risen the power ceiling of every available damage dealer that we currently have. Now listen up, I don't want those of you who aren't interested in her to feel extreme FOMO. You can absolutely clear all the endgame content without pulling for this character as long as you know what you're doing. Remember that WuWa is a game where the more skilled you are, the greater your returns are. I would actually say that WuWa is the game where you have to worry about FOMO the least. Firstly, because the devs are rather generous, and secondly, because if you're a good enough player, then you can solo the whole game with a level 1 Tao Chi. You get the point. Yet I'm not gonna undersell Shorekeeper, man. She genuinely is nuts. I don't think she'll be kicked out of the meta for a long time either. Think about it. Sure, Verina's getting knocked off of her best character pedestal now that Shorekeeper's around, but with that being said, you're still gonna be using the plant kit and TOA. A third dedicated support would have to come out to knock Baiji out, dude, and then a fourth to finally kill off Verina. So we're gonna need to wait for quite a while for this lady to get killed off of the meta. I'm not taking 4 stars into account here since the 4-star characters in WuWa certainly are something? Okay, credit where credit is due. But anyways, point is, you can definitely feel secure in your pull when it comes to this specific unit. She'll have a very long shelf life if things continue the way that they are, and rest assured, I am very impressed with his unit. Kuro cooked to the high heavens. With that being said, I hope all Shorekeeper wanters shall become Shorekeeper havers. Her design is absolutely ethereal, and I really do like the whole aesthetic they've got going for her. She's a really interesting character conceptually, and I really like that she can turn into a butterfly. That's pretty neat. Do you think she's the butterfly in Zila's light cone? 1.3 looks like a pretty exciting patch for WuWa, so I thought it'd be worth getting into making content for it again. I myself am pretty stoked about the Black Shores. To all the WuWa lovers that have watched this far, how'd you find this video? Let me know down below in the comments. Hopefully this video was able to tell you about Shorekeeper's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out. And if Black Swan is a Nyx reference, then Shorekeeper is a Lavenza reference.